One of the things we like to start every morning with is something we call the jargon of the day. Speaking of taking something a little bit at a time, learning a little bit more every day, that's what we like to do. Take one word or phrase or anagram and demystify it one at a time, right? One a day. And so today's word is reinforcer. And this is something that you're going to hear me talk about, and we talked about it a lot yesterday. We know that a basic principle of ABA is that in order for any behavior to be maintained, for us to keep doing any behavior over and over and over again, it has to be reinforcing, right? So, or we wouldn't do it. If it doesn't have, Dr. Phil says, what's the payoff? What's the paycheck for this behavior? Because there always is one, whether it's a behavior that's considered a bad behavior or good behavior, there's got to be a paycheck or we won't keep doing it. Well, if we can accept that basic principle, it opens up a whole world to us, because then we can look at behaviors that our kids are doing that we don't want to have continue, like banging your head against the floor. And we can say, what's the payoff? And we can figure out what the payoff is and create a different payoff, or create something that, is more worthwhile, that makes more sense. There are a whole bunch of things that we can do so that that behavior no longer gets a payoff. And give it a replacement behavior so that there's something else that does give the payoff, right? And change that behavior, get rid of some behaviors forever. Really effective. And other behaviors that we want to see more of, when we want to teach a child a new skill, we have to make that behavior reinforcing, and that's when we want to use a reinforcer. So let's take a look at what the actual definition is, and then we're going to give you a more simplified one, right? Okay, so the actual definition of reinforcer is a stimulus/event delivered contingent on the exhibition of a behavior, which increases the probability of that behavior continuing to occur or occurring more often in the future. For example, if the child enjoys being tickled, tickles may be used as a potential reinforcer for correct responding or appropriate behavior. Okay. Not the easiest definition, but the example helps to make it clearer, right? All right, let's take a look at our working definition of reinforcer. A reinforcer is something that acts as a reward. Okay, that's easier to understand. Acts as a reward for your child and motivates him or her to continue engaging in a particular behavior, good or bad. Because let's remember that when a child is engaging in a bad behavior, there is something that is reinforcing it, right? So when we think about, I always like to use an example for ourselves as opposed to our children first, because then we get a little bit better understanding of it. When we want to do something, let's say that we want to start walking on a regular basis, and because I'm thinking of me, right? That I'm needing to be exercising and walking on a regular basis. We can just say to ourselves, well, I should do that, right? And then how likely is it that the behavior changes and that we start walking? It's very unlikely, right? And even there are some times when we can, there's some punishment that's going to come and we think, oh, well, that'll make it happen, right? The doctor says you've got to, or, this bad thing is going to happen. But a lot of times that doesn't make us do it either. But what we see is that if we give ourselves some sort of a reward for having done it, that, okay, if I walk today, then I get to do 10 minutes of, shopping online, let's say, or whatever it is that happens to be reinforcing to that individual person, then we see that the likelihood sometimes will go up. But what's the difference between when it does go up and when it doesn't? Well, if the thing were really reinforcing, it would go up. Sometimes we pick something that isn't truly reinforcing enough. Back last fall, there was somebody that I really wanted to stop smoking, really wanted for them to stop smoking. And so we made this deal that every day that I exercised for a half an hour, the very next day, that person could not have a cigarette. And I have to tell you, that was so reinforcing to me that there were times when it was 11:15 at night and I was conked out and I would wake up and think, oh my goodness, I did not get my exercise done. And I would get up and put the exercise exercise shoes on and I would exercise because it was so reinforcing to me. There was no possibility that I wasn't going to do the work. It didn't become about the exercise anymore. It was, I don't want for that person to have the ability to have a cigarette because I didn't move, right? Really reinforcing to me. And it worked great for about 3 weeks. And then that person had stopped smoking completely and said, I'm never going back. I'm never going to quit smoking. It doesn't matter whether you exercise now. And guess what? Then it wasn't reinforcing enough for me. And I didn't find the immediate reinforcement. So my exercise went out the window. But we can think of this for our kids and say, all right, we're asking our kids to do some difficult things. If it was easy for them to do, they would have done it already. If it was reinforcing for them to do, they would have done it already. This includes everything, right? From speaking. It's hard for a lot of our kids, and it's not reinforcing. But if we can figure out what actually is reinforcing to them and deliver that reinforcement on a regular schedule that rewards them immediately for having done the behavior, we will see an increase in that behavior. Now, the great thing is that over time, we can start to fade that reinforcement. And if it has become reinforcing in and of itself, it will continue. And that's what we're always working towards. So when we talk about reinforcer, I just want you to know that it's something that makes it more likely that the behavior is going to occur. If I don't know why, but it always comes to mind, a pink lemonade jelly bean. I don't even know that they make those. But if we have a child who loves pink lemonade jelly beans and we're asking them, for instance, to comply, and we say, come here. And when they do come here, they get at least a piece of a pink lemonade jelly bean. And it's so exciting to them to get the pink lemonade jelly bean, then they're going to come. And that's what we want. So that we're gonna do trials again and again and again where the child comes, the child gets a jelly bean. After a period of time, we're gonna fade the reinforcement. We're gonna give less and less until the reinforcement goes away. But by that point, the child will be saying, come here, and the child comes and is learning that complying is something that leads to good things. We can build a whole repertoire of skills using these techniques, and we can decrease a whole host of challenging behaviors just by being aware of what's reinforcing it and going about these things in a very smart way. Multiple steps to it, but we have to understand what reinforcement is. Reinforcement is the paycheck for doing the behavior. This is powerful stuff. When you start to think, okay, how can I reinforce the behavior I want and take reinforcement away from a behavior I don't want, you're ready to change your world and to change your child's world. It's really exciting.